Voice, a show where we celebrate the bold and powerful voices of women, women of color, and women in the LGBTQ community who are redefining the music and film industries. I'm your host, Aline Kazarian, and in each episode we'll dive into conversations with trailblazers who have turned obstacles into opportunities, using their vision to amplify their voices and inspire change. Today, I will be joined by Sadé Ndya in the second hour of the show. Sadé is a cinematographer, fine artist, and community organizer. Her visual language hums with surrealist imagery and dynamic lighting, giving shape to beauty, nuance, and culture on screen. She was recently named an ASC Rising Star by American Cinematographer. From working with brands like Nike, Google, Disney, Delta, to visual stories screened at Tribeca and honored by the NAACP, her range is breathtaking. Her nonprofit, Made in Her Image, is carving out pathways for women and non-binary youth of color into film, tech, and mentorship. She's traveled globally, shooting in Tokyo, London, Brazil, sometimes using a translator to make vision universal. She's done it all. Dropped out of film school and turned that into a launch pad, got signed by an agency at 20, and carries with her all the stories in between. I am now joined in the studio by Sadé Ndya. I'm very excited to welcome her in the studio. Sadé, how are you?
I'm doing amazing. So happy to be here.
Yeah, we were just talking on air and talking about art school things and film school things, and I'm very excited to get into this conversation. So the way that I usually like to start off these conversations with my guests is for you to talk about your origin story before all of the cool credits and, you know, the projects you've worked on and all those things. When you look back on your life and growing up and when you were starting to realize that you wanted to have a career in the film industry, do you feel like there was a moment, whether it was small or big, where it sort of quietly set you on the path that you're on right now?
I love this question because I'm so big on roots and origins in my own personal practice as a filmmaker. And my humble beginnings in filmmaking and even just image making was just so wholesome. It started off as being the family archivist, and I felt like the world was in my hands as soon as I got this Canon T3i. And I was always documenting like the family gatherings or the big family moments or the big holidays. And me and my family had this tradition that we would do every year where we would come together on Christmas and make a music video of our favorite like Christmas song at the time, and it would entail like bringing all the aunties and uncles together, like learning choreo and lip singing and transitioning between shots, and it would be all of the cousins coming together to direct them and just put on this whole production actually. And I didn't really know much about like the filmmaking process at the time, but we were doing it already, and it was really about like the community and the family coming together, but also that experience of watching it back together, you know, and just feeling like, oh, this is a memory, and this is a memory and a piece of work that we're going to honor and cherish together forever as a family, and it's going to archive our legacy. And so that really just prompted me to keep going in the practice, is like, what does legacy and archiving my family history look like for me?
That's so beautiful. I don't think I've ever heard a story from a filmmaker where it's so specific in that sort of way, and also just so beautiful. The fact that, you know, you would document these moments that you would have with your family, and it became such an important component of who you inevitably have become now. Right. As a filmmaker.
It planted the seed to so many other things.
Completely.
Yeah.
It seems like it just set the tone for everything. I'm curious to know if your family ever had any sort of, you know, reservations, that typical sort of, you know, especially if you're a first generation student wanting to go to art school or film school of any kind. I remember like when I was a kid, my parents would always want me to go into something that would be a little bit more supportive, and financially especially. But they were also always very supportive of my interest in art, so eventually they let me go to art school. But I wonder if your family ever had any sort of reservations, or if they also fully supported you in wanting to pursue, you know, a degree in an education in filmmaking.
It was a bit of a dance, you know, like my family, like both sides of my family are two very opposite worlds. Like my mom is from South Africa and my dad is from Belize, and just like the lifestyle and the cultures are so different. And a lot of people end up choosing something more practical because you're thinking about like taking care of your family and like future generations. And so definitely me coming in and being like, oh, I want to go to film school was very taboo at the time. But my family, they're such lovers of film and art and music and fashion. Like they've always appreciated the medium, but there was never really someone in our family to like really make the push to go after it. And so I was really that person to just say, whatever, I'm just going to take the risk and see where it goes. It's not guaranteed, but I know that I have something to say as a filmmaker and as an image maker. I'm just going to go with blind faith and see where it takes me. And so it's been a journey, you know, definitely with my family, but I think they've definitely like grown in support over the years and just been excited to see me grow as a person through my experiences as a filmmaker and my relationships as a filmmaker as well.
So let's jump to that moment where you finally decided, okay, I'm gonna go get a film degree. I'm gonna go to art school. I'm gonna do the thing. So you're a film school dropout.
Yes,
which
in bold.
I always love those kinds of people and the education that they have in terms of, you know, what they learn during their time in art school and then what they gain in the process of leaving and then getting out into the real world. Because I feel like art school, film school, anything like that, it feels so much like a bubble. You are there with your other students, you're, you know, taking in a lot of information and you're trying to learn all the things. And I feel like there isn't much of an emphasis on what it actually feels like to be out in the real world and to actually be on set, to know how to communicate with your fellow creatives on set. So walk me through the process of starting film school and then when you ultimately decided to leave, and also what you potentially gained in the process, what you maybe lost in the process of leaving film school, and just what that all felt like. You know, what was that particular education like for you?
100%. It's really tough because I get asked this a lot, like, is film school worth it? And for me, my experience and my own journey is so subjective to what I was going through at the time as an artist, but also the community that I made through the program as well. And so for me, going to film school was it was an interesting self-reflective time for me because I didn't know much about what being a cinematographer even entailed. Honestly, I was on the journey of a lot of first ofs in the program, and a lot of the filmmakers that were in the program came with the fundamentals of already knowing the gear and like having experience with the gear. And cinematography can be very much so a boys club. So I'm like peeking over shoulders, like trying to get my hands dirty. And it just felt like so much of a fight to even have access. And so to feel that in the classroom setting, just on a technical side, was a big influence on me and my workflow. And it really just made me feel stuck for a while. And then even going back to the more educational practice in film history that we learned in the school as well. I was always the one raising my hand and challenging the professors and urging them to diversify the curriculum in film school, like teaching us about filmmakers from the LA Rebellion, that like the Black and brown filmmakers that influenced me to even pick up a camera in the first place. We didn't even watch a Spike Lee film in the course. And I'm like, what? That is fundamentals. Wow. That is Black film history. That is all history. You know what I mean? Wow. And so breaking down those doors was just like such a long game. But through those experiences, I ended up coming across this group of organizers within the school called Anti-Racist Classroom. And those are my people. That's where I really found my community. It was a mixture of other designers amongst different tracks, not just filmmaking. They were in fine art, illustration, all of the photography as well. And they had the same grievances where it's like, we're not learning about enough Black and brown artists and image makers that can actually talk about the breadth of work that we're trying to create. And that all affects practice. It all affects the body of work that's being created through the program. And so through our collective, we were organizing, we were challenging the school. We were just doing so much work at an institutional level to get them to open up, where it just became exhausting. And we're like, why are we fighting so hard to change an institution when we're already doing the thing? We've already found the community through the system, and we can already go out and create the thing ourselves. And so it's like you experience these things for a reason. Like through that experience, I was able to find my love of activism within filmmaking, and that later prompted me to be an educator and a mentor and to organize myself, because it's like there aren't many intentional spaces for us, and I feel like a duty in my craft to, one, make the work that fleshes out the kind of stories that I want to tell, but also advocates for people behind the camera and giving people the resources and tools that they need to succeed as well.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, there's part of me that everything you just said resonates so much, because without naming names, we went to the same school.
I know, right? The trauma bond is there.
Yeah, this is what we were also talking about off air. But the thing with me too is I feel so close to education, and it's such an important thing in my opinion.
100%, yeah.
And there's part of me that never wants to give up on the possibilities that exist within these institutions and how things can change and shift. So I wonder, in your opinion, do you think there is still a possibility for these major institutions to actually implement the kind of change that obviously you realized from a very early beginning at your time at this school, along with your fellow classmates? Do you think there's still time for those changes to actually be implemented, or do you think it's kind of a lost cause, and that going to these sorts of institutions is almost like a stepping stone to meeting the kinds of people that you met, for instance, to lead you on a quest and on a path that involves activism, mentorship, all of these sorts of things? It rattles my mind in a way, and I never want to give up on these institutions, but at the same time, I'm like, should I? And
It was good.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, is it possible to play that game and win at the end of the day?
Right. It's tough. Like, I hate to say that it's a lost cause, because I do think there is hope, but it just comes down to the people who are informing the decision making at a higher level. Like, even seeing like Solange curate a whole music course at USC, that's inspiring. So it comes down to, one, the educators that they choose to hire, for sure, and also the people saying yes. So like, even through Anti-Racist Classroom, like, we were packaging curriculum. Like, I curated a whole film curriculum of what I would have wanted to see through the program. I organized like a whole film festival highlighting Black and brown filmmakers that the school, barely any of the professors even showed up to the event, you know? Wow. So it takes like the actual genuine interest and care and empathy to really like foster an intentional creative space for filmmakers. And it really comes down to the hiring and like who's at the higher level, building out the educational curriculum and whatnot as well.
Yeah, because I feel like it's partly a generational thing.
Yes,
and
definitely.
then there's another part of it where it's almost as if the interest isn't there in these individuals because they were never exposed to any of that kind of art and filmmaking. So it's a frustrating combination, because you go years and decades where the same sort of people are in those positions to dictate what students in these institutions will learn, yet you realize that there's so much that they're not teaching, and there's so much more out in the world that hasn't gotten the proper exposure that it deserves.
Right.
And so even if you say we're in a position where maybe you didn't know a lot of these filmmakers that, you know, made you want to pick up a camera in the first place, imagine how frustrating that must be to not see that sort of representation, you know? And that, I feel, is one of the things that oftentimes makes people think, okay, well, I don't really see a future here for me. I don't, like you were saying, it could be such a boys' club being a cinematographer. I imagine a lot of the faculty too were men.
Yep.
So it was the same thing for me. And I was in a different department. I was in illustration, but it was so much more heavily male than female. And a lot of the things that I also learned in my department felt very out of touch with what was happening in the world at that time between 2010 and 2013, you know? So yeah, it's a very frustrating process. But I imagine that when you met those people, that again, it was it made you feel like there were possibilities out there, and you didn't need to be in that space in order to get the education that you needed.
Exactly.
So you leave.
Yes.
How long were you actually at the school until you decided to exit?
It was crazy because I was on my 3rd year. I was almost done.
Wow, so you were about to graduate.
I was almost done, but I was doing so much of work outside of the program. Like I was freelancing, I was crewing up for other DPs. I was working in the lighting department as a gaffer, getting my hands dirty and just like seeing how other people worked, but then also organizing outside of school. And then I started my own production company called The Red Futon, where we were literally doing like branded music videos and like branded content for like upcoming businesses in my literal living room. Like, and that was during a time where like Black film Twitter was just everything. Like I met so many filmmakers through the program, and I mean through the platform, and then also like that's how I would find collaborators and crew members and talent to be on these like short form projects. And so I was just already doing the thing. So I was just like, what is still calling me to this institution where I have to take out loans every year and pay daunting loans to stay in the practice, where I'm already doing the thing and learning so much on the job and in the field. And later, after I dropped out, I got signed like the same year, which
That's amazing.
does not happen. You know,
Yeah.
I got lucky. I was blessed, but it was because I was actively doing the work while I was going through that transition as well.
Exactly. And I have a very similar story to you as well. I had also started freelancing while I was still a student there in
That's the way.
preparation for graduation. And I feel like that is oftentimes not talked about.
They tell you not to do that.
Right.
They tell you to focus on school, but it's like,
Right.
how is life going to be in my career after this?
Right.
What is looking forward?
Because you have such a short period of time after graduation,
Right.
unless you're in a position where you can take some time off, you can go do your thing, and
Right.
you know that's a blessing, obviously. But I think for the vast majority of people, you do have to try and find a job as quickly as possible after graduating.
Right.
And
Right.
you know, there was always this talk, at least in my experience, and this was something that we were talking about off air too, of like, if you have this degree, it means something.
Yeah.
And you will land a job at major companies. And that has not been the case for me. You had mentioned that was not the case for a lot of your filmmaker friends, that having that particular piece of paper just doesn't seem to matter. You know, it really is the
Portfolio, the body of the work.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And the path that you took, which was, I'm just going to do the work.
Right.
I'm just going to put myself out there. And I think that takes not only a certain level of confidence to do, which I think you innately have, but I think that level of confidence is also something that could be taught.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's not. And
Yeah.
that is a part of institutional education that really pisses me off, is that level of knowing yourself and knowing how to put yourself out there and knowing how to handle business, knowing how to communicate with people,
Right.
is just not talked about.
Right.
So
100%.
what are your thoughts on I don't know too much, so please, enlighten me when it comes to AFI and even that sort of pathway, because I know people who have gone through that program. I don't know the extent of what that program is like. So is it sort of like if you don't want to go to film school, you go to AFI, or is it that some people go to film school but then they also go through AFI? Like what just enlighten me, please.
Yeah. It's, well, from my understanding, it's a grad program as
Okay.
well. So it's like continuing undergrad film and just really building relationships in filmmaking. I feel like I admire a lot of directors and DPs that came out of AFI. Some of my closest friends came out of AFI, and you just get a lot more professional fundamentals in the narrative world. And their biggest thing for a DP as well is like learning how to shoot on film, which is something I didn't get access to at the school that I was going to. And so just like those resources are very imperative. But then again, it's like institutionally, like grad school is expensive. Do you got grad school money? You know? And so
Right.
not everyone has that access. So definitely, even with like my own personal practice, I'm like trying to like hand off those resources to building community, finding your director, building a visual language for a film, like outside of just institutional practice, because, you know, having access to like institutional education shouldn't be the thing that limits you from creating, you know? And ultimately that's why I move with such intention in that way, is I want to make sure that filmmaking can become more equitable for other filmmakers that look like me, that came from a small village outside of the country and decided to pursue filmmaking. I want to make that dream more of a reality for other people as well.
Talk to me a little bit about your own visual language and how early on it really became clear to you to not think of cinematography necessarily as just light and camera.
Right.
But what that distinct visual language is for you. When did that happen for you?
It kind of grew over time. I realized, for me, it always starts from influence. Like, I grew up loving the works of Spike Lee and Michel Gondry, incredible French surrealist filmmaker. And so I was like, how can I blend the two? You know, like, I want the crossover of the two, where moving with elements of magical realism, but also grounded in reality, and also shifting the culture and advocating for my culture through the medium as well. And so within my own personal practice, through like different films that I've shot and even commercials and music videos, like, I've noticed that I have like just certain sensibilities that lean towards magical realism, whether it's like through my lens choice or my lighting approach or even framing cues. And so for me, anyone that's worked with me, they know how particular I am in pre-production when it comes to building out a visual language. Like, you will see a breakdown of how I want the lighting to specifically look, framing cues for certain characters. How are we meshing the cinematography with the actual character development within the story? I always want to be of service to the stories, because I might come in with like a cool shot, but is it servicing the story? And so that process of finding that with a director is honestly my favorite part of the process. And that's something I like to, you know, encourage other cinematographers to employ in their own process, is once you have that synergy with your director in prep, like, creating is just way more enjoyable on set. And also when you're delegating to other departments as well, it's like they get excited about your vision too, because it's something that you've built and fostered through the process of prep. And like, when you get into physical production, everybody got a question. Everybody got a lot of questions about how are we going to do the thing? Why are we doing the thing? And so as a cinematographer and a director, we kind of have to always have those answers, but then also be able to be collaborative in a way where we're finding it with our crew members, and we're also empowering our crew members to go and work towards the same vision as us as well.
I love that you said that you're a very particular person, that, and you've also mentioned the word intentional too during this conversation, which really resonates with me, and it gets my gears going. Like, it makes me so excited to know that there are other people out there who are just so particular about what their decisions are.
Right.
And I want you
especially
to
as women in leading roles too.
Exactly.
Like, there's extra pressure for us to have everything figured out. Yeah.
Because I think that's something that people on the outside maybe don't really realize with cinematography, is that, you know, when you see the film credits, you always see the director's name, and you think that the director is really the head honcho, which that's partly true. But I think something that people don't really realize is that cinematography is just as much of a leadership role on set as is production design. Those three, I feel like, make the triangle, right? And the groundwork of everything else that happens. So I want you now to talk to me a little bit more about that relationship that you develop with the director, and what those initial conversations are like. Because the director, I imagine, oftentimes has a very particular point of view about things, and talks about, you know, how they want to tell a story in a very particular way, or if you're working on branded content, you know, what that is going to look like. And I want you to tell me about how, you know, your own vision comes into the mix with all of this. Are there moments where you have to compromise? Are there moments where you really feel like you need to push the director in order to get to a place that feels even more heightened and potentially even better than what the director's initial vision is? Talk to me about that whole process.
Yes, I love that. I kind of stems from what we were talking about earlier about like a cinematographer's gaze. Like, I always go into a project knowing what my personal sensibilities are as an artist and what my taste is. But also a big thing I've learned over time as a cinematographer is adaptability. And so some directors, they might want to play up the surrealism. Some directors might want to find more of a subtle approach to like slide in some of the elements of surrealism. And so for me, I'm always just really fostering those initial conversations with the director, getting inside of their head. What are their references? What are their challenges within a project too? I feel like that my type A Leo brain. I'm like, I love a challenge.
Okay, can we pause for a sec? Because I swear to you, I feel like I have some sort of astrological radar.
No
like,
way,
I can just
you knew?
sense somebody's
It's
sun
the BB.
sign.
Yeah.
And I took one look at you, and this was the first time that we were meeting.
It's the hair too, I feel like.
Maybe, because I've known a lot of Leo women that just have fabulous flowy hair. But I took one look at you and I was like, I bet you anything she's a Leo, and I love that.
Yes,
I love Leos.
Okay, I love a good
so
read.
This is incredible. Sorry, continue.
No. I mean, and that dictates a lot of my sensibilities as an artist. Like, I'm always moving with creative fire, but also, I love a challenge. So, like, even the last director I worked with, like, we're shooting this quinceañera scene, and he's like, Sadé, I want to shoot a 360 shot, and it has to be clean. Like, the challenge was it has to be clean. How are we gonna light for a 360? I can't rig above in the location because it's like a very fancy like quince hall, and so it just got my brain moving. Instead of saying no, we can't do this because there's nowhere we can hide our lights and we don't have enough people. I was like, oh, as an image maker, how can I come in and like create lighting depth within the space? How can I bounce light so that it feels more naturalistic and I'm hiding lights behind like production design elements? And that's what we were talking about earlier. It's like when key departments kind of come together and to create a solution, I feel like directors love that because it's like, oh, we're really like, we're not letting like, resources or the budget limit us from creating and executing a specific shot or a specific moment. And those moments usually end up being like the best moments on set too, because it's like, it's like a little bit of doubt kind of pushes me to go a bit harder. And so when people actually see the thing executed and it's that moment where everyone's behind Village and just this moment of silence and they're just like taking in like how beautiful this shot is and how all of the elements are coming together to create this moment. Those are like the moments I strive for on set. It's just like, okay, we do this, it's just very affirming to know that like, all of our creative decisions are going towards something, and then also coming down to also that advocating for a whole cultural nuance too. Like, we don't see a lot of quinceañeras on screen. So I'm really excited to just see that whole film play out as well in itself.
You strike me as someone that is quite calm on set. Correct me if I'm wrong. You seem quite calm. You seem like someone who really, under pressure, you can just flip a switch and go in a different direction. And even if you don't know exactly what you're doing in that moment, you're able to stay calm. You're able to talk with everybody around you and really try and figure out what the solution is.
Right.
So I'm curious, in your perspective, for somebody who is wanting to get into filmmaking and specifically wanting to become a cinematographer, is there a piece of advice you would give them when they are on set and something were to go completely awry and they just don't know what to do in that moment? What are some things that they could potentially learn or practice before they get on set in order to build that level of, I'm going to be calm under pressure, I'm just going to try and figure out what the solution is. Is there a piece of advice you would give to someone in that sort of situation?
I feel like people don't focus enough on the importance of building a very intentional team of department heads. Like, I make an effort, like a really strong effort to make sure I'm bringing on a gaffer or an AC that's, one, excited about the story, but also can handle some of the technical and creative challenges but on set, but also have great ideas, great creative solutions. I always love department heads that come in with creative solutions because I might not always have the answer. And that's okay, you know what I mean? And I feel like as cinematographers, as women in cinematography, there's so much pressure on our shoulders to have everything figured out, to have answers for everything. But it's like sometimes you're really finding it on the job or you're finding it in prep. And so I'm just very particular about curating a team that feels intentional to the project and that always trickles down on set too when something goes wrong. Like having a gaffer that can creatively pivot or get ahead of the next setup just helps one, makes me look better as a DP, but also just helps me feel supported. Like, oh, they're really driving the story with me. It's not just me on my own. And so the more you can create safer, the more effort you can put into creating safer spaces to create, and like establishing a collaborative, open environment for everyone's ideas to be heard and seen, it just shows in the work. And all those like little mishaps on set, they're sorted out instantly because it's like you have a great team really helping drive you forward as well.
I wondered though, has there ever been a situation for you, or potentially a situation that can come up where, say, a project's budget can hinder your ability to build out the kind of team that you want to build out? And if so, what do you do in that situation? Like, do you just keep it small and mighty and try and be the person that knows as much as possible were something to go wrong? Or how do you adapt in that sort of situation?
Honestly, all the time. There's never enough money. I feel like every project I've done this year, never enough money. But it's about, how we pivot and find creative solutions for sure. And another big part, I feel like, of like creating equity in filmmaking is like, sometimes, I have a gaffer that I bring on commercials usually. And I'm like, yo, can you just do this little short film for me real quick? Because I know we can really cook on a really dynamic look that could eventually, help us establish another project as well later down the line. And so if this crew member does this low budget short film for me, I always make sure to return the favor. Filmmaking is so built on favors and like that back and forth, but some people never return the favor, and I always make an effort to return the favor. Oh, you supported me on this short film, I'm gonna make sure I get you on this next commercial or bigger music video, whatnot. So it's like that usually kind of helps with like navigating dynamics as well on set. It's like there's never going to be enough money, there's never going to be enough resources or tools, but it's about how we make the most of the tools that we're able to get. And so even on short form, there are times where I feel like I don't have enough lights. I'm so particular about lighting, and sometimes I feel like I don't have enough lights, but it's like, how can we maximize the resources that we have? And that all comes down to like those initial prep conversations with the gaffer as well.
Let's talk about traveling while you're filmmaking, and in particular when you're in places like Tokyo or you're in places like Brazil, and yes. I read about how you've used what do they call them? Oh my God, why am I blanking on the word? people who are able to translators.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness. So when you're in countries where you need to have a translator and you're trying to communicate a vision and an idea, what are some of those challenges that you've faced when you're in a different culture, you're in a completely different country, and there's different customs and all the things? How are you able to navigate working on set when you are in a situation where it feels like you're so out of your comfort zone? And what have you learned in the process of being in those sorts of situations?
I've honestly learned the most about myself as an artist and even just as a person on travel jobs, because I feel like you really get to experience how other people live. And for me, even before I'm about to go into a job, I try to make an effort to just have like a solo day where I'm exploring and just taking in the culture, because I also feel like that influences how I approach lensing a project or a certain community. As an American, I don't want to come in with an exploitative lens. I want to make sure that I'm adapting my sensibilities as an artist to what's around me. And so even shooting in Japan, I randomly spent a day not knowing the language, took a bus 45 minutes outside of Tokyo just to go to a temple and just take in, the peace and serenity of the place, and also just people watch as well and see how people interact with one another. And then when it came to showing up on set, I feel like it set the tone of how I was talking to crew, how I was operating the camera, even down to that. And so even when we traveled to Brazil was way more, it was polar opposite. It was really fast paced, and it's everything's moving so quick, but they move with this creative fire that's just so inspiring. And so it's learning to adapt to personalities was a whole other thing in itself, because that job was literally in the span of 3 or 4 months. So I'm literally, the one in Brazil, Japan, London, whatever. But I was literally hopping between worldviews, but it was really inspiring for me as an image maker to really just get in the world of all of these subjects that I was capturing. And so, it all comes down to adaptability and how you communicate as well. I feel like it's so so different across different countries that you go to as well.
Is there a way that you would describe your own communication, how you communicate, and what that looks like for you? I don't know if that question makes sense, but is there a particular style of communication that you have that you feel like you're able to get your point across in the clearest and best way possible for everybody else to understand what it is, and maybe something that, you know, people who are listening can even pick up on and learn from your point of view?
It's interesting because it's changed over time. I feel like when I first started as a cinematographer, I was so like, sit up straight, let me come prepared with overheads. I know what exact light I want and what exact corner, all of that. And then over time, it's like you just get better results when you're being more collaborative, like even talking to gaffers and ACs, like talking about the shot, talking about the moment, talking about how it services the story, and getting their input on how we can achieve a certain look, and like moving more with that creative fire and synergy is like way more effective than just being like, you know, very like constructive, like this needs to go here, we need to do this, we need to do that. And sometimes it's a balance too. It's like on commercials, I feel like there's so much pressure on the DP to make the day, so it's like sometimes you do have to bring elements of like this needs to happen at this time, but I'm always still trying to find ways to move with that creative fire and like employ my like key creatives to move with excitement and be excited, just as excited as I am. And I feel like when you move with that creative intention, everyone finds synergy on set for sure.
Yeah, there's a collective energy that everybody just picks up on and becomes even more excited about. So then people are just ready, you know, to create in that moment. Totally, it feels contagious. Yeah, in a lot of ways.
Exactly. And it doesn't always go that way too. Like I've been on travel jobs where it's like I'm working with older crew that they're like, does she even know what she's doing? And they don't care about any creative references or decks or anything. They're just here to deliver on the day. And so like being able to pivot to that communication style is a whole other thing as well. It's like sometimes we do get lucky with the crew members that are excited about the creative fire and moving with that and talking about references and getting excited about influences. But then sometimes there's the more practical side of filmmaking in the work field where it's like you really have to come in with a plan and a vision and be specific and know what exact light does what and what lens is going to give you what. So it's literally 50-50.
It's just a balancing act at any time, and it doesn't matter where you are or what project you're working on. It's just these elements are always sort of in the mix.
Yes.
And like you said multiple times, the word adaptability, you really need to know how to adapt in these sorts of moments. Another word that you mentioned, and this was something that you brought up, you know, when you were in film school, which is mentorship and, you know, being an activist and that really becoming an important part of your life and in your career. And what I'd love for you to talk about is Made in Her Image.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of through lines, I think, with, you know, a lot of other organizations that exist within music and in film. And I want you to talk about what Made in Her Image is, what your involvement in it is, and then also what mentorship and activism really looks like and feels like for you, and you know, what dedicating yourself to that part of emboldening the next generation of filmmakers really is looking like for you.
Right. I love that. Made in Her Image is like my heart and soul. It's like what keeps me going, honestly, because there have been times where I've questioned, like, is this the right field for me? But just the community that we've built with Made in Her Image is so inspiring, and it's like we're so about like uplifting the next generation. And it really started with very humble beginnings where the other organizer, Malachi, incredible director and founder of Made in Her Image, we met on a random freelance job, probably found on Facebook or something. And it's the kind of thing, is like when you see another Black woman behind the camera, it's like seeing a unicorn. You gotta say something. We were like freelancing for this town hall. It was very like documentary style type of project, but we didn't know each other going in. So we met each other through the practice, and we just ended up like connecting and just riffing over just our dreams of like wanting to create more access for us, because we're going through so much currently in that present moment to even get in the room. We're doing these random freelance jobs on Facebook ads, you know? And so It started as a budding idea, and then through that just initial conversation, Malachi ended up putting together this like Sundance lab where we did a workshop intensive for young women of color to learn about filmmaking and develop their own scripts. And a lot of our projects were project based, so it was like a 1-day or a 2-day workshop, but we finally were able to curate a full-on filmmaking camp last year, and it was sponsored by Converse. We got the green light from this grant from Converse to put the camp together, and it was what we've been building up towards for the longest time. We've been building a curriculum. We have a whole workbook that is like curated for Black filmmakers specifically, and it all goes back to like the grievances that I experienced in film school, not having a diverse enough curriculum that represented the kind of work that I want to make. And so with that camp, we were able to, one, give the filmmakers the fundamentals of actually physically doing the thing, but also developing their stories all the way to post, from production to post as well. And so for me, it's just also seeing the stories that came from the program was just so beautiful too. The students had such intentional stories about navigating like their gender identity, their relationship with their parents. It was so many specific nuances that these young women and people and non-binary folks are going through, coming up through just their own personal lives. And so to be able to use filmmaking as a vessel to really tell their story was inspiring in itself. And then to be able to watch the films back with them and like just see them go out, and some of them are in film school now. Some of them, one student won like a Student Academy Award like That's from the awesome. Program. It's just like following their journeys after the program has been really inspiring as well. And just being able to foster an intentional and collaborative community space for them to learn and grow in their careers as well.
And I imagine too for the youth that are going through this program that it's embedding a sense of positivity in them, you know, and they're probably not jaded yet with what the film industry can be like.
Exactly.
You know, so there's this sense of positivity and possibility within them that is developed, I think, at a really early and very important phase in their young career that can then propel them forward and also be able to overcome a lot of the obstacles that they might face when they are actually participating in the real world proper. You know what I mean? Because that's something that I personally, I don't want to say the word hate because I feel like that's too strong of a word, but really struggle with the film industry is there are oftentimes so many more remakes of movies and superhero movies and big blockbuster films. And there's, I don't mean to sound like there isn't a space for that, because that is a form of entertainment. And, you know, if you want to make that kind of movie, make that kind of movie.
Right.
But the issue for me really is that the types of stories that you even just mentioned with the youth who have been able to, you know, learn things about their gender identity, learn things about their family. You don't see those sorts of stories out in this major sort of way. Right. Because a number of things. I mean, getting a film made in and of itself is a sort of Sisyphus type of thing, right? It's so hard to do and to accomplish. But it's also so possible. But then at the same time, it's the funding, it's the distribution, it's all of these things that all come together and really make it a challenge to get it to a place where it does have major distribution and major marketing behind it, and it gets in front of a shit ton of people, right? So I don't really know what my question is outside of, I guess, hearing what your perspective is on all of this and sort of where you see things within not only the independent filmmaking space, but how, you know, even production companies like A24, for instance, how those kind of production companies can really challenge the movies that are mainstream, so to speak, and really out there in front of a lot of people.
Well, a big intention going into the camp that we facilitated too was employing these filmmakers with confidence in their creative ideas. So we were giving them resources on the prep process, but then also on physical production is like knowing how to communicate your ideas to the rest of the crew, to your talent. And then down to even when we had they had such a beautiful screening. We got greenlit to host the screening on the Universal lot. And they had like a whole like press run. Like we were even prepping them to do like press interviews on a red carpet and everything. And just making sure that they were feeling like these films that they were creating were being fostered in a safe space. And I think we can get caught up in the bigger production companies and waiting to be greenlit for our personal projects, but the fact that we were able to just do the thing ourselves and be at the forefront of employing these filmmakers to tell their stories was inspiring in itself. And it made me really like shift my focus. Instead of trying to, you know, leap ahead for the XYZ opportunity or film or production company, how can we like be like the Isas and the Ryan Cooglers and build the framework at a ground level? And I feel like that's really where the future of independent cinema is really going to excel, is when we realize our power and realize that we already have all the resources we need to do the thing. We already have the collaborators. It's really just, it just comes down to the financing, but it's like what are other mediums to get there? You know what I mean? And so those are all things we've been unpacking within Made in Her Image. Like we have dreams of becoming a full-on film school one day, ironically enough, being the film school dropout that I am. But I know that that kind of resource and platform to amplify upcoming filmmakers could really, you know, shift the kind of work that we're seeing in the community. And so it's all a trickle-down system, but I feel like we really have the power. I'm all about power to the people. We are at the forefront of really shifting all of these things, for sure.
When you're mentoring or teaching young filmmakers, have you noticed there being a, you know, some sort of limiting belief or something that's been a common occurrence, and you know, a way that you've been able to come into their lives and really show them, hey, this is, I understand what you're feeling, but here are the possibilities. Has there been something like that? Has there been a common limiting belief that you've noticed within the younger filmmakers that you've mentored?
That's a good question. I think it kind of comes back to what we were just talking about, like with confidence, like just employing them with confidence. Because even oftentimes, I had a mentee recently, I was supporting her on set, and all her crew was mainly men, and she was the only woman on set. And that dynamic already is a lot to navigate. Even if you come in with a plan and a vision, it's like they're still going to second guess. They're still going to ask questions. And that doesn't just happen like in the beginning of your career. That continues to happen as you rise up through different workflows, through different production types as well. And so for me, I was like, I would pull her aside at lunch to just like give her a pep talk, you know. And I personally, there have been times on set where I felt like I needed a pep talk, but I could tell that she needed it in that moment, just to affirm like, you're doing the right thing, you're on the right path. And just like getting her to find confidence in communicating and delegating. And I feel like it's just, what's so tough about like set flow is like every hour counts, you know, and it all affects the next hour. And so I just really wanted to employ her with that confidence to communicate and to ask for things and to be sure of your decision as well. Because there are times when you're working with male crew members where you might be sure of your decision and they might be like, really, you want that? You know, and that's a whole tit for tat too. And you have to lead with even more first, like, yes, that's what I want. Let me see what that looks like. You know what I mean? And so just, you know, finding that confidence and that swag, and it's a long game. I still battle with that all the time. I feel like that never really goes away when you're working in an industry built by men, you know? And so, that's always a big thing I'm just trying to find with my mentees, is like finding that confidence.
Do you think there's also this element of maybe a lack of not knowing what happens on a set? And
Yeah, definitely.
You know, because there's so many moving parts, and there's so many elements and individuals that have to come together in order to make a film come to life, or a commercial, or a music video, you know, whatever the case may be. And I feel like, you know, when we're growing up and we're watching movies, we see the credits, but if we don't actually take the action to learn what these different titles are and what these different roles are, then we're not going to know what actually happens on a set on any given day. So for the individuals who don't, say, go to film school, and who don't necessarily get the access to knowing what can happen, do you think that also plays a part in maybe hindering their confidence levels when they're actually on a set?
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that I have actively, experience firsthand too. Because it's like when I got signed, I was DPing right away. I didn't really fully come up in crew like some other folks. And having that experience of coming up in crew is actually super resourceful, because you see how other cinematographers work, how they navigate different dynamics, how they navigate certain specialty setups and all of that. And for me, actively, like through my commercial work, I'm experiencing a lot of first ofs on the job. But it's like being able to surround myself with crew members who have already done the thing has been super supportive. But definitely having more access for students to like get physically on set makes such a big difference, because you can really see like how set dynamics are shifting and navigating on set.
Yeah. We're sadly running out of time. There's like 10 minutes left.
Oh my goodness.
And there are a few questions that I would love to dive into. They're kind of heavier questions. And I feel like maybe at least if you can provide this perspective of what the not the music industry, what the film industry, there's so many parallels with the music and film industry right now, and there have been post-COVID that I oftentimes get them mixed up. But the film industry, I'm curious to know, at least from your perspective, after COVID, how things have sort of shifted and how you see things progressing within the next few years, especially with there being so much talk about AI and that becoming more and more of a thing, with synthetic performers and this and that. And it all feels so goddamn daunting.
Yep.
And I suppose, how are you just mentally navigating all of this?
It's interesting because it's like after COVID, I feel like it just shed light on a lot of things that need focus. And I feel like the people who are really winning right now are the ones who have been able to pivot, like we may have one true path that we're seeking, but also like having other talents in other realms or going into other mediums has been very fruitful. Or even for me personally, like I was doing a lot of commercials around that time, but now recently with like the shifting of the seasons in the industry and all of that, I've been really like short form, like film content has really been paying my bills and taking care of my crew members as well. And it's also the most creatively fulfilling for me right now, because I'm actually creating short films with very intentional stories that I hope to do like in the long form feature world as well. And so being able to just be open and try different things and try different mediums is like really all that it takes right now. And also doing other things too. Like a lot of like my directors are working in-house somewhere. A lot of my DP friends are working in-house somewhere. And so it's like, it's just about staying afloat and still staying consistent in the thing for now until it gets better at that point.
Which is easier said than done, I think, in a lot of situations, because there are people who have families and they're trying to figure out what to do, but then they have this passion of filmmaking and they want to be able to continue on that path.
Exactly.
But it really does take 110% of your energy at any given point. So it's like, how do you
navigate all of that?
Exactly. And how do you balance it all? Is there even a way to balance it all? Do you have to just give something up in order to be able to maintain a career in filmmaking? And, it is, I think, it feels like a great purge in a lot of ways, like purging of self, purging of the industry, purging of a lot of things in order to really get to the heart of a lot of the issues in the industry and what can be done, which can be a whole other conversation.
And we're still actively figuring that out now.
Exactly.
That's what's so tough. It's like there's no right or wrong answer. We're still actively finding what moving forward looks like in this field.
And it's all happening so quickly.
Yeah.
Everything is shifting so quickly, and it almost feels, again, I know I've used the word daunting, but it feels very daunting in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's something that you've recently unlearned about either yourself or about the industry that is, challenging you in a positive ways, making you realize things about yourself and the work that you do in a way that maybe you wouldn't have known if you didn't unlearn something.
Oh, I actually have a good one. I feel like this year has been a lot of I feel like as a cinematographer, like I want to be about the work and the art and just like focus on that. But a big part of filmmaking is also the business side and the politics and the relationship building as well. And so like what that looks like for me is really fostering the relationships that I've built with the directors and producers and production companies and even clients, like taking a second to like unpack like the work that we've done together and talk about like what future making looks like together, and like what our goals are, what worked on a project, what didn't work on a project, and really fostering like the community and the connections that I've built now at this point in my career. Because I feel like I've met like honestly some of the directors that I see myself collaborating with for forever, honestly, and that's like beautiful to like have. And I just want to make sure that a big part of my day-to-day is also working on fostering those relationships. I feel like we go so quickly from job to job, project to project, but we also want to take a beat to really reflect on like what's working and what's not working on projects. And then even navigating like vendor relationships, like with rental houses, I'm always trying to find equity in practice with that too, where like if a rental house is going to support me on a short film that I'm really passionate and excited about, I want to make sure that I'm making the full effort to return the favor on like a commercial or a bigger job. And so it's like finding ways to really like create sustainability in my own personal relationships and practice has been everything, because it's like these are the people who are really fostering you through your career. It's like we want to be about the art, but we also got to make sure that we're maintaining the community and the connections that we've built as well.
So do you think the core of what you unlearned in this process is having to not be so go all
exactly
the time?
Yeah, not so focused on just the art, like really just mending those relationships as well.
Yeah, because it is, again, the film industry is an industry, as you said, that is so built on relationship.
Yeah.
And having relationships that feel like you're not only supporting each other, but there's also this sense of camaraderie. There's this sense of, creative synergy. And when that all comes together, it, I think, not only creates a safer and more positive industry, but it also makes it so that you feel like you're able to do anything.
Right.
You know? And I think that that's a beautiful thing. Something that I always close out the show with is the question of how you really hope you are remembered by people, not only through the work that you do, but also just the person that you are and how you show up on set, in people's lives, what that looks like for you. What would be that for you?
Ooh, this is like my life's work.
Yeah.
I would say for me, personally, with the work that I actively pick up and the work that I've done, it's like all I ever strive for is for folks to feel seen in different ways, whether it's through the stories that I'm choosing to tell, or even just like how I learn to lens and light a subject as well. It's just making sure that people feel reflected and seen on the big screen. And also what we were talking about earlier with just like my family roots is like creating that legacy and archive and documenting moments that we can look back on and really hold true to ourselves as well.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Sadé, I truly can't thank you enough. The fact that, we had been talking for a while to try and get you on the show, and I'm so glad that it finally worked out with timing and with scheduling and everything. And I've been such a big fan of your work. And one of the things that I absolutely love about the internet is that you're able to connect with people who you might otherwise never have met in life. And I'm just so grateful that, our paths have crossed and that you were able to be on the show and share your story. And thank you so much for being on here.
Thank you for having me.
One final, I guess, question is there anything that you're excited about, that you're working on, that people can, check you out, check out your work, and any way that people can connect with you? Is there something that is just exciting for you right now?
Yeah. I'm actually developing my first feature with a director right now that I'm really excited about. And it's like a very interesting commentary on co-parenting, and it's a story that I see my own parents within as well. And so I'm really excited to go on that journey, and also I'm learning to shoot on 35 millimeter and like experimenting on film. So I'm just like really excited to work on a feature that feels intentional to my voice and my vision as a cinematographer, and show people what I can do in a longer form as well.
Awesome.
Yes.
Sadé, thank you so much for being on. This was an absolute pleasure. All right, folks, that does it for this month's episode of Her Vision, Her Voice. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I will be back for another episode on November 18th. Until then, I'm Aline Kazarian. Stay tuned for Beats of All Nations and more dublab programming coming up next. Have a great weekend, everyone.